All right, the Big Ten bowl season is underway, but we're going to spend the next hour talking about one a little bit maybe more relevant than the Duke's Mayo Bowl that's going on right now in Charlotte. We're talking Buckeyes, Clemson Tigers here on Ohio State Live, our 86th edition. We got Kevin Noon on top there from rivals Buckeye Grove, and of course, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, Steve Hellwagon. We're awaiting arrival from him. Boys, how we doing? How was the trip?
So far, so good.
Uneventful, which is good.
Yes, that's what you want it to be. If traveling can be uneventful, it's never going to be a party. It's never going to be a pleasure. But if you can just get there in one piece with no big hassles or lost anything, good to go. Good to see both of you on the line. Appreciate you guys making time because I know that you're extremely busy. Would like to communicate to everybody out there that these guys are on site, of course, in New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl. Ohio State and Clemson have a ton to do, a ton to chase down. So we appreciate their hour of time here. All right. The last time that Ohio State made it to New Orleans, things worked out pretty well as a pretty substantial underdog at the time. Considering I'm thinking back, and since the Buckeyes are typically an underdog, how many times a year? Typically 0, maybe 1, stretching it to 2. That to be a 7.5-point underdog hasn't happened since a double-digit status against Alabama. And again, that worked out pretty well, Tony.
It did, and now you're talking about the number 11 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes facing Clemson. If we're going to use Dabo's rankings, which why wouldn't we? And so, yeah, it'll be interesting. I think Ohio State was favored against Clemson the last 2 times they played. So now they are going to be the underdog, and I'm sure they're playing it up, at least in terms of what people think and what people expect, outside. I wonder how many people are going to be picking Ohio State in this one. I don't think it's going to be a lot. And when you've got a line like that, it's going to be something. It's something that Urban Meyer would certainly use. It'll be interesting to see how Ryan Day plays the underdog role because, well, I think this is his first time, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm trying to remember what the line was last time these teams played, but yeah, it's certainly
2 points, maybe.
Yeah, Urban would have all sorts of mental warfare going on right now. I mean, depending which side of Urban Meyer you're on. If you were pro Urban Meyer, he was a master motivator. If you were anti Urban Meyer, he was a master manipulator. But he certainly would have had everybody really ready for this with the whole disrespect thing. Nobody in the nation seems to be picking Ohio State. I mean, this 7.5-point line may as well be 70 just based on some of the stuff that we've already seen and heard so far coming out of the national pundits or whatnot. Ohio State dropped its official game week trailer this week, and they certainly they have it going on. They have it going on. So it's gonna be interesting, and I'm sure we'll cover all aspects here of this hour as we kind of dive into the game.
Do you think the point spread's legit, Kevin?
Ohio State hasn't been able to break through against Clemson before, so there certainly is nothing to sit there and say that Ohio State's 11th, as Tony said via Dabo Swinney. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, 7.5 seems like a lot, but I definitely think Ohio State goes into this game as an underdog. I certainly do.
Got Steve Hellwagon on the line here, hustling to make it on time. Good for you, Steve. Good to see you.
Hey, guys. I'm just a minute or 2-3 minutes late. Sorry.
Well done. Steve Hellwagon joining us from Bucknuts 247 Sports. I'm guessing that the city, the atmosphere brings back some good memories of about 6 years ago.
Obviously, beat Alabama, New Orleans. So, when you get in the same stadium, none of these players experienced it, unfortunately. But it'd be that kind of a breakthrough, obviously, if Ohio State's able to come through and get that win on Friday against Clemson. I mean, you'd put it up there along the lines just because of the 2 playoff losses previously. It's kind of like not even close yet, to make it up for what's happened in the past. So I'll be interested to see if the Buckeyes can handle this challenge, and it's going to be a tough one, I think.
I'm going to serve up my typical topics and questions. We're going to go through the live chat, but you guys know that if there's anything of relevance or anything interesting that you guys think needs to be touched on, just fire away. We've got Vinay here, who is recently, based on his communications with me, goes directly to Tony. I told Tony this yesterday. I asked Tony this. So Vinay then gives me the version of the conversation that went on from there. So Vinay's telling us, pitch this idea to Tony yesterday. In order to contain Trevor's legs in the pocket, would you rather have a Mike linebacker spy or go to a two safety look? I think two safeties is better. Vinay has been analyzing the tape like 24 hours a day over the past week. Any thoughts about the safety look?
I'm with them on the two safeties. I think we'll see more of that. And I think even Dabo or Tony Elliott said the same thing, where they've played a little bit more two safety look this year, as we all know. And it was that single high safety look that makes the Trevor Lawrence run happen. It allows it to happen more. And I think they were caught off guard a little bit by that last year, or a lot by that last year, even though Ryan Day says that they knew he could run. They didn't defend it very well. Maybe they overran it sometimes. So at least they are prepared for it this year. So if they do the single high safety and they stick with what they do and they stick with Ryan Day's favorite defense, they are at least more aware of what Trevor Lawrence can do with that read option. We saw even more of it against Notre Dame. And in these games, the quarterbacks are going to run because every yard is important, and you can't protect your quarterback for the next game.
Let's start with the two quarterbacks as we go through this. You got something, Kevin?
No, I was just trying to make sure that we didn't have dead air. I was just going to jump in and just start talking.
You're good at that. So I was just going to start at the quarterback position and basically say, I get it. The Justin Fields criticism, the questions that are being raised, I get it. The Indiana performance, if you go snap by snap by snap, was actually a good performance. He had 3 mistakes. The Northwestern was a different situation. Didn't have his best receiver. And he was pretty harassed throughout that game consistently by the Wildcats. But I do have to say that the question marks maybe start there, and I can justify the 7-point spread, 7.5 points, based on, I think if these teams are firing on all cylinders and they're fully prepared and have played the same number of football and gotten in the same number of reps, I should say, then I think they're even. But I can see where Clemson's played a little bit better football against maybe more talented team at one point or twice in the season with Notre Dame. And to start at the quarterback position, Steve, when we look at Trevor Lawrence being a constant and Justin Fields almost becoming a bit of a wild card to some people.
Yeah, I mean, you think about Trevor Lawrence, he's got the championship from 2 years ago and made the championship game last year. I think he's only got one loss as a starting quarterback, and that was to LSU in the championship game. So he's got all the credentials that you're looking for. He's got all the ability you're looking for. I mean, he can do everything. He had 366 yards, I think, total against Ohio State last year. But when you deconstruct the box score and you take out the 3 screen passes for 99 yards or whatever it was to ATN for 2 touchdowns and his 107 or so yards rushing, that takes a lot of Clemson's production out of there. The Buckeyes basically didn't allow Travis Etienne to beat them running the football, and they didn't allow Trevor Lawrence to beat them throwing the football to the wide receivers or the tight ends. They made Clemson beat Ohio State left-handed with the quarterback running the screens. And we asked Kerry Combs yesterday about that, okay, you can lock down the run game like you always do a bang-up job against the passing game, which I think they'll be okay in that regard. But if you can't also stop the quarterback run, or at least contain it, and also have an idea about ATN in the pass game, because he's caught 44 passes this year in 11 games. That's an average of 4 per game. And you get him in the open field, he can go the distance at any time. So it is a mismatch to put one of Ohio State's linebackers on him. And getting back to what you're saying earlier, maybe they need to put a safety on ATN when he goes out for a pass, because he's going to run away from a lot of people. So they got a lot of problems trying to figure out how they're going to stop this team. And going back to Northwestern, my feeling was the 4-man rush up front was non-existent for the first half, and Peyton Ramsey had a pretty easy time of it, I think, in the first half. Then they dialed up some stuff in the second half, and the guys up front got it going, and they forced them into 3 second-half turnovers, and that game kind of turned on a dime. Well, if they can't get to Lawrence with 4-man pressure, he's going to stand in there and pick them apart. So I don't know. They got, as I said, they got some major issues here that they're going to have to deal with. I mean, Penix was one thing back with Indiana, and he had, an outstanding array of wide receivers to throw to. I don't think Clemson's receivers are quite on that level just yet. It's Amari Rogers and a bunch of young guys, it seems like, at wide receiver for them, since Ross didn't get to play this year for their injury and Higgins left for the NFL. But it's going to be a handful, I think, for this Ohio State secondary nonetheless. So it's kind of like pick your poison, I guess. How do you see Clemson trying to attack you? And I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, did we see anybody, since the 2 tackles have been so consistently dominant for the Buckeyes, looking at the outside pass rush, do we see any trends? I know it's only been 6 games and it's difficult to pick up on a trend, but in terms of players ready to maybe explode from that position, whether it's Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith on down the line, Tony?
The trend that I see is Tyreek Smith always being about just this close to bringing the quarterback down and then the quarterback getting rid of the ball. And you wonder, will it ever happen for him? It reminds me of Jalen Holmes was the same way. He'd always be so close, but he did end up making some really big plays throughout his career, and Tyreek Smith has made some as well. But it was still just waiting because he's got a lot of talent, and he's just coming up short here and there, but he gets in the rotation. Jonathan Cooper has maybe 2 games left, and he came back for this, and he's had everybody's had a shortened season, and this isn't the season that anybody expected, but down to the end of it, he's played well, he's led the team well, but again, he's a guy that's always come up a little bit short in terms of the production angle, and those 2 guys need to step up. We know about Zach Harrison, and there's always questions like, why isn't he playing more and things like that. But I think Jonathan Cooper is the leader of that defensive line, and you need as much out of him as you can get, because you keep looking for, where are the sacks? Where are this? Where is this? Where is that? And they do get pressure, and they do create some havoc, but you would like to see the quarterback tackled 8 yards behind the line of scrimmage to set up a second and 18. And we, don't get to see that much, but I do think there will be pressure. And then it gets to, how do you contain Trevor Lawrence? Because he's really good on the on the outside as well.
The Clemson defense did that to Ian Book the second time around, where they certainly taught their defensive ends at what level they wanted to push the rush and contain the pocket to keep him in there. I'll start throwing out these questions, and anybody can jump in that wants to scarf them up here. David Greenshield, will we see Shaun Wade covering Amari Rogers?
No, I don't think so. I think that might have happened if the Ohio State has 2 outside corners that, in addition to Shaun Wade, I just don't think they can. There's nobody else to put there outside, so you have to keep Shaun Wade outside. I think it would be a good solution if there's another outside corner, but at this point, you go with Marcus Williamson. You try to help out. It's Clemson's passing strength against Ohio State's pass defense weakness, and so I think a lot of the game, while we know the game will be won in the trenches, that slot is going to be huge, and Marcus Williamson or whoever else they have helping him out needs to be ready.
Yeah.
Certainly the inferior team during bowl season certainly pulls out tricks to win, and I'm not calling Ohio State that. The media and Vegas has given them the underdog status, not necessarily what the talent would say, but Lucas is asking about, or basically he's making the statement about Ryan Day pulling out trick plays to beat Clemson. Of course, those have to be reserved. If you're relying on trick plays, then you're probably not prepared or feel prepared to and talented enough to win the game. But what trick plays could be out there?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them running any trick plays. I mean, Ohio State got to 6-0 on the season for a reason. Ohio State scoring, 44, 45 points a game for a reason. I don't think you need to go out there and be doing a bunch of halfback passes. Then again, I don't know if Evan Spencer shows up and wants to throw a pass here in the Superdome. That seemed to work out just fine. But Ohio State was a pretty significant underdog to Alabama in that game. But I think Ohio State's offense, just based on what they do well, if they have all the pieces there, meaning Chris Olave, if they have all the pieces there, I think they're going to be able to move the ball against Clemson. I think it's really just going to come down to, here's the trick play I want to see. Put up 6 in the red zone. Don't put up 3. They can't let Brett Venables just bog them down when they get into the red zone and they're settling for 3. If Ohio State's able to have, whether it's just through good old-fashioned running with Trey Sermon, or, maybe they need to reintroduce Justin Fields to his tight ends, I think that there is plenty of opportunity there, and I don't think they need to get cute or whatever. I think they can just sit there and run their offense as long as they run their offense and not dial it back to a page or two.
I agree with Kevin. They don't have to do any special bells or whistles for this game. They just need to execute what they do best and stay with that. We saw some variations of some, I wouldn't call them even trick plays, just some unorthodox stuff. They ran a lateral to Garrett Wilson that he fumbled for a 7-yard loss. That was no good. They tried a screen pass from like the right hash over to the left sideline. It got blown up, like a 40-yard pass from side to side, basically. And Northwestern had sniffed it out. It was like a 3-yard loss. So, I don't think trick plays are their bailiwick, to borrow a Tim May, our friend Tim May, Columbus Dispatch. That's not in their wheelhouse. That's not in their bailiwick. So I think that they need to do what they do best, and that's running the football and doing the play action pass off of that, and let Fields get comfortable. Let him hit some passes early in the game. He threw for 320 yards against a good Clemson defense last year. They start like 5 sophomores and 2 freshmen. I don't think this is the same defense they played against last year. Of course, I don't think either of these teams is as good as the teams they put on the field last year, but the 2 quarterbacks kind of bring the whole rest of the group along with them and make everybody else look so much better. But I don't know. I'm interested to see what Ohio State's got in mind, because they just need to do what they do best, and that's run the football.
Tony, another private message coming in here from Nothing New. So you guys can work this one out.
We did try to go for beignets today, but the Cafe Du Monde where we went, the line was around the block. So we just kept driving and hit some, sidewalk cafe instead, which was just fine. If you don't know anything about New Orleans, there's places to eat here, so.
Well, I've never been, so I've heard.
And places where you can get a beverage or, a libation, if you will.
I would think so. It's got a bit of a reputation for that. Nothing new. I must have taken part of his tip money and donated it here to the channel. We appreciate that. Nothing new. Go Bucks. Appreciate that. Lucas is predicting the tight end Luke Farrell gets into the mix with the touchdown reception.
He was very open against Northwestern, so he may continue to be open. They just it's up to Justin Fields to get to that progression.
All we've heard out of Justin Fields is that this sprained thumb is going to be miraculously better by Friday.
Now, I want to ask you guys, because I assume you guys are all on the Zoom call with Ryan Day and then Justin Fields. Justin Fields said the thumb will be fine by Friday night. Ryan Day was very short in saying the thumb will be okay. And just how the way they said it kind of caught me off guard. Like, are you trying to convince us that everything is going to be fine? So that my ears kind of perked up. I'm just wondering if you guys think everything is on the up and up there.
I mean, last year it was about which brace he was going to wear. Was it going to be the big brace or the soft brace or whatnot? So, yeah, it did hit me a little bit there. I don't know. Maybe I just want to believe. Maybe I just want to believe that it's all good. Disney magic and all that good, happy horse, you know what. So, yeah, it was something that I caught there. But, again, I don't, I don't know how much of it really was his thumb and how much of it was he just had an awful game against Northwestern. And I just don't know where one starts and the other one ends.
David Greenshield believes that the backs and the tight end is underutilized in the passing game.
Well, I think that goes without saying. I think I don't know what happened with Fields in the last game, to be honest with you, other than he didn't have Chris Olave, who is his security blanket. No completed passes to the tight ends. I think Master Teague may have caught one pass before he went out. Julian Fleming was a pleasant surprise early, but then really didn't give him a whole lot after that. It was just like they were trying to force the ball into Garrett Wilson, and they basically abandoned the pass altogether once Trey Sermon started ripping off chunks in 10 and 15 and 20 yards apiece. And really that's all they needed to be doing. So because Northwestern, after a while, had basically thrown in the white towel and couldn't handle the athleticism or the physicality at some point. So I think they need to test Clemson in that regard. But I do believe, again, as I said, they've got to get Fields off quick, early. And I like what they did last week on the first play. They tried to throw an easy pitch and catch to Fleming, and it went off Fleming's hands. It was kind of outside of his body frame a little bit. Not sure who to blame on that. But, man, that's the right idea is let's get him 1-for-1 for 7 or 8 yards and get a young guy a catch and just kind of build on that as they go. And, I mean, we are in for what figures to me to be like a 3.5-hour war. I mean, we were watching the game. I was watching a game last night with Miami and Oklahoma State, the first game, and there was a lot of scoring in that game. But I looked at my watch, and it was like well past 9 o'clock, and they still had like 4 or 5 minutes to play in the game. And I mean, that's what we're in for, is like a 3-hour and 45-minute, 4-hour marathon, because just the way these games unfold now with the long timeouts and everything. And you really have to stay engaged, because it is just such a battle for such a long period of time, longer than any of these kids are used to playing this game. I mean, you don't practice for 4 hours. So that to me is a challenge, is keeping your team. And last year we saw it went down to the next to last play of the game, and Clemson had the interception and pulled it out. So that seems like it's entirely possible again this year. Not the Clemson part.
Gerd has quite the fan base that's growing into quite the mob here. But
I wouldn't
maybe
call
a
this
few
one
detractors here, but nothing close to the love fest that's going on for Gerd in the live chat. No,
I'm going to throw in some super chat to get that comment removed.
There you go. We will always accept those. Man, if you could include the fans on the field actually play the game to add to the incentive and the motivation, I don't know how it can get any greater than what it is right now. You got a 4-0 series all time. You got what happened last year, just in regards to if it had just been a cleanly officiated close game that went down to the wire, but it was marred by 3 questionable bad calls. And then on top of that, you've got the disrespect coming from Dabo with the number 11 ranking and the 7.5-point spread, and a whole contingent of Buckeyes coming back, of course, led by Sean Wade when they could have gone pro. And man, the motivation should just be simply, we want to win a national championship and win playoff games. We're competitors, but I don't know how much more that just ups the ante.
That's been a question that some of the Clemson players have been asked, like, Ohio State's going to be motivated. What's your motivation? And I'm sitting here like, well, They could play for a national championship if they win it. That's kind of a lot of motivation. And Ohio State is definitely motivated because of this game. They've wanted this game since they left the field of the last game. But I don't know that I don't know that bumps them up any more than Clemson, who wants this just as much as anybody, because they also left the field, their final field last year, disappointed. And this is Trevor Lawrence's last go-around. This is his last opportunity to win a national title. So he's going to be motivated, and everybody's going to be motivated to play with them. So I don't understand the questions from several reporters this week of, how are you guys even, what's in this game for you, basically? We know what Ohio State wants, but what's in it for you? And players have to be, although Matt Bockhorst, their offensive lineman, said the motivation for Clemson is intrinsic, and it comes from within, and they just want to live up to their standards and, do everything right that Dabo has taught them. And it was just some really deep, 5-minute answer. But what he could have just said is, yeah, we're still trying to play for a national championship, you idiot.
Right. Yeah. Ohio State needs to play with emotion, but not emotionally. They can't allow themselves to just get exhausted with all of this emotion and all of these, subplots or whatever. I mean, you don't want a team coming out flat that's not playing with emotion. It's when you play emotionally that, this 3.5 hour, 4 hour game that, we've already kind of been discussing, you can't keep the foot on the pedal for 4 hours like that. So you've got to find a way to channel that emotion, but not allow it to become the overriding determiner.
That's what Lou Holtz used to tell Urban Meyer when Urban asked him, like, how do you prepare for a bowl game? He's like, you don't play the game in the first week. It's a slow build up, and it's the same. If you go into this game too emotional, something bad happens and you're down 14-0 in the first quarter, you might lose it. But if you're even keeled, 14-0 is, it's just another part of the game, and you can come back.
Yeah, I think that all the stuff that's been said in last year's game, those are things that the coaches subtly and not so subtly remind the players about during the 13 days leading up to the game. And I think that's what, it's such a short turnaround that you don't really have time to come down off the high of whatever it was, winning the Big Ten championship. And, it was like, here's a couple days off, and you're not even going home to be with your family for Christmas. You're going to stay here because we can't afford anybody getting sick, or you getting sick and making other people sick. And so it was just kind of like they've been immersed in this bubble, and it's been going on for months. I think the bigger picture of this, it's so much bigger than just revenge on Clemson or trying to set a wrong, right, as Olave and Fields might be thinking for that last play or whatever else. I just think it's a journey that these guys have been on all the way back to March. And whether they were in the same room together or on a Zoom call together or eventually got together, went through all the hoops to work out together in small groups in June and then had a conference only scheduled and didn't have a season for 6 weeks, didn't have a season. And then somebody somewhere, man, it's just the human spirit that really kind of captured this thing. It was the parents. It was Justin Fields. I mean, it's so much bigger than just this Clemson revenge thing. This was a movement of some sort that they had to put themselves in this position that they felt that they deserved a chance to be in, and they're here. I mean, they made it happen. And, people will question, well, do they deserve to be here or not? Well, it doesn't matter because they're here. And now they need to make the most of the opportunity that they have. So I think all that stuff gets you to game night, but then on game night, it just is kind of like your training has to take over, and you have to go out and be singular focused for, as we say, 4 hours to try and outlast that other team and win this. It's going to be a nut cruncher type game. I mean, it's going to be a physical, sledgehammer type game like Urban Meyer used to call it. And I'm just, I think we're really in for something on Friday night. If everything is equal and these teams are both tuned in and healthy and ready to go, it could really be something.
I usually don't fall into these cliched narratives, trap games, looking ahead. I'm not big on that typically, but I do think because of what happened last year and because of there being a certain amount of maybe pressure on Ohio State, uh, self-imposed possibly, that if they do get down, that I can see that there could be more doubt that would creep into their minds than it would on the Clemson side, considering what happened last year in their favor after they got down and having experienced success in that situation where it wouldn't affect them as much. I think that's only human nature. Again, I'm not saying that's the case for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. I think we got a pretty good comment here from Aunt E, because if Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett aren't disruptive, the defense is toast. Because when you think about a mobile quarterback and when they get loose is typically they break contain out of the pocket, and that usually comes when the DNs go too wide or they find a gap in front of them that's large enough for them to, pick up a 3rd and 7. But if Togiai and Garrett are pushing that pocket right in Trevor Lawrence's face, then typically even quarterbacks as elusive as him aren't able to escape.
And they could be chased into a defensive end who maybe doesn't always get it done by himself. But yeah, that's running and pass defense. Those two guys are going to be key. And if they can't control the line of scrimmage, that means Clemson is. And now, after holding Travis Etienne to 36 yards rushing last year, it's going to be impossible if those two guys aren't at the forefront of that defense, literally. And they had Devon Hamilton doing it last year. Now you need Togiai and Haskell Garrett. And those two guys I have complete faith in this year. Haskell Garrett, first-team All-American. Tommy Togiai is every bit as good as Ohio State has had. And I think those two guys, if they don't, man, if they struggle, then Ohio State is going to struggle, and it's something I don't expect them to do. But do you throw the thought out there, and then you have to do the exercise of, that would certainly not be good for the Buckeyes if those two guys aren't controlling their portion of the defense.
Yeah, I agree with Tony. I mean, they've brought it all along. I know that we raised the degree of difficulty with Clemson, even though, I mean, it is a line that is only returning one starter, Jackson Carman. These guys are really good on the line, but I guess I've never really allowed myself to think too much about what happens if Garrett and Togiai aren't able to carry the water, because I've always just kind of penciled them in as grading out as champions pretty much every week.
And the Haskell Garrett selection is an All-American. We know that that designation sometimes comes from reputation, but in a 6-game schedule, I don't think he came into the season. Certainly he was on people's radar, but with that kind of reputation, like, okay, unless he screws up and doesn't give us anything, we're going to make him an All-American. Yeah. Tony, you're shaking your head like, yeah, he showed it on the field.
Well, and the thing is, he's a senior, and his first 3 years, he's just been a reserve. Last year, he got into the rotation. The year before, just a little bit into the rotation. He was a guy who you were waiting for Teron Vincent to step in front of him and start. And then Haskell Garrett would be helping in the 2 deep. And then this summer, he gets shot in the face, and then you're just like, well, there's no way you can rely on him this year because that takes precedence, and that's going to take some time to recover from. And then within like a week, he's back at practice, watching practice. Then soon after, he's practicing again. And then the first time he gets into a game, he's in the backfield instantly. He's picking up sacks. He's getting tackles for loss. And you're like, this is not the same guy we saw. And I asked Kerry Combs about that when we talked to him a couple days ago. And he's like, when he came back, he literally had a new lease on life, and he plays like it. And he's more Kerry Combs even said, we hug more. He's more like locked in. He's more emotional. He's more appreciative of everything. And you see it in his play. And he's still mulling over his future because he could come back next year because this is a free year for everybody. And if Ohio State can bring him and Tommy Togiai back next year, that would be gigantic. And if they lose both of those guys, that would be Titanic. Titanic as in the ship.
Yeah. I think Haskell Garrett, what a great success story. Again, just talk about another great story connected with this season. And we don't know fully what happened in that shooting incident. And to our knowledge, no one's ever been charged with it in connection with it. But you think about it. His life probably flashed before his eyes when that happened, and it really kind of puts everything in the proper perspective and priorities and everything. And I think about with him, defensive tackles a lot of times are like offensive linemen. They don't have a lot of statistics that you're gonna, he made 12 sacks or anything like that, because the position really doesn't lend itself to that. I think with him, the play that he tipped the pass and intercepted it against Michigan State in the end zone was probably the seller for him to create his own defensive touchdown by tipping a pass to himself. That's a play that a lot of people could kind of sink their teeth into and understand the kind of impact that he had. I mean, they've had some great nose tackles and defensive tackles over the years, like a Ryan Pickett or a Big Daddy Wilkinson. And, those guys are back 15, 20 years ago. A lot of guys since then, and guys that are playing in the league, Cam Hayward, and any number of other guys. So if he's the next one in the long line, and Devon Hamilton's up there right now, latched on pretty good with an NFL team. So Jashon Cornell, if he hadn't gotten hurt, I think would be doing pretty well as well. So again, this is Larry Johnson. Man, all he does is spit out NFL players. And if you want to go to the NFL as a defensive lineman, you need to go play for Larry Johnson. That'd be my advice.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We talk Buckeyes each and every week with these three. And it's always a good time, always important, always good stuff. But of course, this is why they play the games, as is stated, to play for championships in Columbus. And it's Ohio State and Clemson, of course, in just a couple of days, Friday in New Orleans at the Sugar Bowl. We got Steve Hellwagon on the line, of course, senior Big Ten writer from Bucknuts. Tony Gerdeman, caddy corner to me from Buckeye Scoop, and Kevin Noon from Rivals Buckeye Grove. And Kevin's got some interesting breaking news.
Yeah, Larry Williams of our sister site, TigerIllustrated.com, reported, and it's been confirmed by Clemson that Tiger OC Tony Elliott will not be traveling to New Orleans after a positive test for COVID. Clemson came out shortly after I saw that message and confirmed it. So Clemson, who's coming down to New Orleans today, will be doing that without their offensive coordinator. And, you have to wonder how much, what that means, how they shift things around. We've seen Ohio State have to go without assistance at a couple of different games. Losing a coordinator is not a small thing.
You guys won't have any more access to players and coaches this week, correct?
We talked to Dabo and Ryan Day tomorrow morning, like 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, 9:30 Eastern.
Yeah, so they'll address that then. And yeah, I'm with Kevin. I think this is huge. Ohio State has been without a co-coordinator. I think Greg Madison was out, but Kerry Combs still calls the plays. And I don't know what they'll do, because even if Ohio State loses Kevin Wilson, they would have Ryan Day calling the plays. Like, I don't know who is their backup play caller and how that will affect them. Is it going to be somebody up in the booth? Can they just, the receivers coach, to see, what kind of situation do they have there? And we'll eventually get that kind of information and get that answer. But that's significant, and that's a guy who you go in with the plans on how you do things. There's sometimes these guys are like, well, they go with their gut at times, and that works. And some guys are really good with that, and now you throw that out. And sometimes you have guys who are also just bad play callers. And what happens if they put one of those guys in?
We are posting your predictions to the screen. Have a number of them coming in. Can't wait to hear from these three at the end of the show. I'm very curious for the first time this year to get the predictions in. Playing the role of Brady Hoke would be Miranda Knight, Clemson 38, Ohio 16.
Well, good thing that the team from Athens isn't playing in this game. So
I don't know what that point spread would be.
Team in this one either.
Maybe 8 or 8.5 instead. Jackson Carman signing with Clemson, of course, was a huge story at the time. We thought he was going to Ohio State. Dabo Swinney has mentioned a number of times that about crossing paths with Urban Meyer and now Ryan Day because of recruiting the same ground. Brian Breezy, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I always forget if it with an S or a Z. In his name was the number one player by some services in the country, certainly a top 5 player when he came out. Was he in Ohio State?
He was a target, but he committed to Clemson so early on that, it was never really that big of a loss because there was never really, I think, any indication that Ohio State truly was a favorite. But, Ohio State was kind of in that small pack of schools that people felt that had an opportunity there. But Brian Brzee really liked Clemson, and he ended it early, and that was kind of that.
Are there any other players along those lines that went to either school that was close to signing with the other?
There's in the most recent signing class for Ohio State, Jordan Hancock was committed to Clemson, decommitted, and commits to Ohio State. In the same recruiting class, Troy Stellato, a receiver out of South Florida, was felt to be a heavy Ohio State lean, ends up signing with Clemson. But, these programs do recruit against each other a good amount. Clemson has gone into the state of Ohio and been able to secure some commitments. Ohio State maybe doesn't necessarily recruit South Carolina all that much, but they run into each other like a couple of charging bulls in the state of Georgia all the time. And, each team gets their guys and, the other one doesn't, and, vice versa. So, there have been some great battles, but I'm having a hard time of really thinking of somebody right now that it was like a top 2 of Ohio State and Clemson where it came down to that. Somebody else may think of somebody off the top of their head, but I'm drawing a blank.
Taj Boyd?
Well, that was a while back, and Oregon was the 3rd school, and as the story goes, over the course of 48 hours, that kid offered up 6 commitments. He committed to Oregon, Clemson, and Ohio State twice over 48 hours, and obviously ended up at Clemson.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm sure if we went through the offers list for both schools for the last 3 or 4 years, we'd have several that are cross-pollinated, and particularly ones from the Mid-Atlantic and Georgia and Florida. Those areas are going to be heavily hit. This last class, Ohio State really didn't do much of anything in the state of Florida. They've taken up residency, in a lot of other states under this coaching staff. So, it always makes for some fun stories, leading up to a game. You have the 2 quarterbacks, Lawrence and Fields, are both from the state of Georgia, about a half hour apart, I believe, is where they grew up and at least went to high school. So I don't think they ever played against one another, certainly knew of one another because there was a lot of hype on both of them. But, those are the fun kind of side plots that go with these type of games. And, again, the history. Ohio State, Clemson have played 4 times. It's the only team that Ohio State has played that many times and has not beaten. Florida State is next at 0-3. Then there's a bunch of schools at 0-2, including the other Palmetto State school, South Carolina, 0-2, back-to-back Outback Bowls. So they're 0 for the state of South Carolina, 0-6 all time. So there's a lot of history. Remember what it was neat when they finally got that Alabama monkey off their back here 6 years ago. And if they're able to do something like that again and get Clemson that monkey off their back this time, just think of the branding it would do for Ryan Day. It would make him legitimate beyond all concerns. He could walk in anywhere and be immediately recognized, as the coach who beat mighty Clemson and stopped us from having the 12th Alabama-Clemson game in 7 years. So nobody needs to want or see again. So, at any rate, that's my thought on that.
We appreciate the contributions from these 3 again each and every week. They've got a ton going on, and they stop their week for an hour plus to be with us to talk Ohio State football each and every week. This will continue. Ohio State Buckeyes Live. It's an 86 edition. It will continue based on your individual contributions. And get us a sponsor. Help us out there if you've got a contact or any great ideas. Just contact me, MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and just want to catch up with these 3 in regards to what else they've got going. Kind of reminded of that by Dalton Moore here, who says, love watching Tony on Buckeye Scoop with his friend Tom. Always making me laugh. Tony, where can we find you?
Yeah, BuckeyeScoop.com. all kinds of stuff going on this week, obviously. Podcast with Tom Orr is Buckeye Weekly. You can find that on all of your platforms. Right now, we're doing a podcast about almost every day since Michigan week. So it's a poor title, Buckeye Weekly, but it's talking Ohio State while there's a plenty to talk about.
Steve, what you got?
Well, this time of the year, this month of December has been one of the busiest months I can ever recall, trying to do recruiting with the signing day and basketball coverage and also football coverage. And it's been such a unique year, and yet it's been a privilege to be there every step of the way and chronicle all these different things that have been going on. And, in one hand, it's kind of like, you want things to slow down a little bit, but you don't want this season to end. I mean, you want Ohio State, obviously, the Ohio State fans out there want this team to go on and beat Clemson and go on and play the winner of the Alabama-Notre Dame game and get to Miami and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, Justin Fields, all things are possible. So I think keep a good thought on Friday night. But bucknuts.com is where we're at. And we've got stories up there, all the subplots and everything else about this game. The game data page I did, it's got all the different ins and outs of this one. And there's a lot to it. So past, present, future, a lot riding on this one. And so we'll see how it turns out Friday night.
And we thank Steve. He's been gracious enough to post these videos on Bucknuts. Kevin, what you got going on? Where can we find you?
Yeah, over at BuckeyeGrove.com. I'm on Twitter at Kevin_noon, or you can follow our site account at OSU at AT Rivals. And we've got our coverage down here from the bowl game. We've got our interns back in Columbus right now who are handling the basketball beat and everything that's going on there with Chris Holtman's Buckeyes. And we got a lot of excitement coming up. We may be talking about a big commitment for Ohio State coming up on January 2nd as Jaheim Singletary out of Jacksonville will make his decision known. Buckeyes seem to be the leader. That would be yet another 5-star. That would be 3 5-stars by Rivals.com in the Ohio State class of 2022. And, of course, we're filing plenty of daily stories. We're doing daily video recaps and, keep it locked in here at Buckeye Grove.
DF Sports, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution, saying this is the most motivated a Buckeye team has been since the 2-3 matchup against Michigan in 2016. Ohio State will shock the world Friday night. Revenge 1-1-21. With Trey Sermon going off for 331 against Northwestern, I'm sure that the coaching staff obviously has done exhaustive film study of what made that happen. Master Teague, at one point in the game, had 2 carries against Sermon's 15, something in that range. Do we think that just completely changed the running back distribution, that Sermon's hot, he's the man, he's taken over, he's going to be the guy, or he just happened to be hot on that game, be provided by the right blocking on his carries, and we're just going to fall back into what it's been?
That's a great question, because Sermon certainly earned the start. The best game either of them's ever had. Best game any Ohio State running back has ever had, supposedly against a vaunted Northwestern defense, although I didn't see a lot of punt in the second half. But you could make a decision and go with it and justify it, and it would be fine either way. And I'm sure however it shakes out, Master Teague and Trey Sermon are going to be fine with it, because they're going to need both of them, I think, to beat Clemson. It didn't seem like – I don't think the Teague injuries really come up this week, that it was that serious. It was depicted by Ryan Day as a sprain, but what we never really clarified, was it ankle, was it knee, was it wrist, what was it? He took a very bad spill. He went down the middle of the field for like a 27-yard run and got knocked ass over tea kettle, or whatever that saying is, and kind of tumbled back down to earth, and it was not pretty. I mean, it could have been anything on the way he came down and hit the turf there real hard. So To me, it didn't seem like it was going to be something that would keep him out of this game. But that's really in the limited time that we've had to talk to Ryan Day, and these guys will attest to it, that the local people got virtually no questions with Ryan Day. And, the whole thing, I think they held him from doing anything with the local media because they didn't want to have to deal with the video that was taken in the locker room after the game. That was kind of a fresh topic, late last week and over the weekend and whatever. So basically from the day the pairing was announced on that Sunday, the 20th, until 2 days ago, he didn't do any interviews. So, your guess is as good as ours as to what's going on with this team, because really they've kept everybody in the dark, and that's how they like it when you're going for a playoff game and whatever. But, we don't have an open practice to go to where we could see if this was a normal year, we'd been able to go over once or twice even to the dome and watch them work out and get photos and videos of the guys running and Fields throwing and whatever, but we don't have any of that. So we're kind of left to them, and there'll be a lot of people watching warm-ups to see is Teague taking his spot? Is he the number one? Is Sermon number one? Is Fields able to throw the football? I think there's a lot of questions that are out there, but either way, if Teague's healthy, I think they're going to split it and could go either way. Sermon deserves a start after setting a record like that, you could say. But again, you're 6-0 doing it the way that you did it. So why would you change it? So I don't know. Bring a fresh Sermon in after they've been loosened up a little bit. Maybe he rips one off again. I don't know. But I'm open to whatever the other guys say.
But on the flip side, I mean, we know that running back is one of those positions where once you get a lather built up, you run harder, and you sit there and you look at the Northwestern game, and Trey Sermon runs for 60 yards in the first half and runs for 271 in the second half. So I know that we all, fresher is better, but maybe not as much at running back. I mean, you don't want to run somebody 50 times or anything like that, but I think that they need to ride the hot hand, and kind of regardless of what Master Teague's status is health-wise, I wouldn't necessarily too keen in making a lot of changes there, especially if Trey Sermon is having some big plays. And I want to kind of give a little bit of a shout out to true freshman Mayan Williams, who only had the one carry, but good Lord, you can't bring that kid down. He's gonna be a good one. I don't know if he's gonna be a marquee, bell cow number one running back, but I love him as a change of pace.
We only get to see that kid like once or twice a game, and every time it's like, whoa, what was that? And sometimes it only may be like a 5-yard gain, but he's had to do some things to get there, and he looks different than other running backs, and he is shifty and elusive and tough to bring down because he's strong. But yeah, I'm with you. You got to start with Sermon. Even if Teague is good to go, you still start with Sermon, because if it does take some time to build up a lather, then give Sermon that time. If you go with Master Teague early on, then it's going to take even longer for Sermon. And we saw Master Teague against Clemson last year. It wasn't good. And things have changed. But right now, if you don't get as much out of Trey Sermon as you can in the 1 or 2 games you have left in him, after he just set a school record, and then now next week or this week he'll 7 carries. It's not quite criminal, but it might be civil.
Somebody made the comment in the chat that Ohio State's about 1,000,001-1. I forget the number, like 300.
304 1-1.
Yes, when scoring at least 35 points. Steve had asked the question in the chat what game that was, because I was racking my brain. I should have been able to come up with it. Yeah. Yes.
The loss was to Clemson, the crazy game where they had the lead, and Philly Brown, I think, fumbled the punt, and Braxton Miller got injured and continued to play and tried to throw the ball with an injured shoulder, which, as we found out, he'd never play quarterback again after that game, which was one thing, although kind of exacerbated it, I guess, when he got back in. He was back practicing at least to start the next season, and then threw his arm out basically in preseason practice. The tie, I think, was against Missouri in like 1946 or 47, 35-35. And I think it was the very first game Ohio State played that was on television, whatever year. I did a story about it one time, and I forget the exact year, but I think that was the tie. Missouri against Ohio State in Columbus, 35-35. And
I thought one of Woody's last teams tied Missouri in a high-scoring game, like in
I'm not sure.
76 or 76 or 7.
No, he didn't have any ties. The only tie that he had in the 70s, I think, was the 13-13 against Michigan, I think.
Woody went he went 7-4-1 his last year, so they had a tie there, and I believe they went 9-2-1 in 76. And I thought one of those was against Missouri.
That could be.
But I don't know that it was that high of a game. Yeah, David Greenshield's making fun of my age, asking if I watched that game because we were kicking around the 78 Gator Bowl the other night with a bunch of young Clemson guys who had no recollection of that, and I was the only one who could say, yeah, I watched the game. Well,
and the story about that is nobody knew what happened when it happened. Like Keith Jackson was doing the game maybe with Frank Broyles or Eric Parsegian, and nobody seemed to know what happened. And when they didn't acknowledge it on the broadcast, the switchboard in New York at ABC got besieged by telephone calls saying, you guys missed this, that the Ohio State coach punched a Clemson player after the interception. And, it wasn't like it is now where you have 12 angles and, it's on ESPN Sports Center for 2 hours after the game talking about it. None of that happened. Everybody went to their late local news and they probably showed highlights of the game and that was it. And then the next morning you come to find out that, what happened and some dispute whether he resigned or if he was fired or whatever. I think they told him he had to resign or they were going to fire him. And the Dispatch wrote it that he resigned and then the Citizen Journal wrote it that he was fired. So that was kind of a crazy time. But
I was 10 years old and I could tell that he lifted up his helmet and tried to slug him right in the neck or the jaw. I could tell it, but I do remember it was Frank Broyles doing the game with Keith Jackson, and they pretty much just kind of bypassed it. We don't know. There's a melee, and we don't know what happened. And they showed the replay about 18 times, and they were like, we couldn't really tell what happened.
Yeah.
Legendary stuff. And the end of Woody after 28 seasons, and that began the Clemson-Ohio State series, and here we are.
None the wiser.
So NCIS Fanatic 21 is bringing to recollection another game that I remember, just the score. I don't remember the game, but Ohio State and SMU tied in Woody Hayes last season, 35-all. Okay, yep. All right. Any other just groundbreaking insight to delve into before we go to predictions?
I wonder whose familiarity works best for each school, because Ohio State is very familiar with Clemson now. Clemson is looking at Ohio State's defense. I don't think they know what to know. We don't know what to expect. So how in the heck can Clemson know what to expect? So I think maybe that helps Ohio State, provided the secondary actually plays well.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy game to try and handicap or predict because, again, Ohio State's defense has been at times dominating, like Michigan State. They slammed the car door on their head, but, and really last three quarters against Northwestern, they had the takeaways and they didn't let them do much of anything. There were a couple long drives, in the early portion of the game. That was a question. And I did a big story about the red zone. I mean, when you settle for 3 field goals inside the 20, 25-yard line, as they did last year against Clemson, and then have the problems inside the 30-yard line that they had a week ago against Northwestern, where they were in there 4 times, I think, in the first 2.5 quarters and got 6 points out of it. They had an interception right before halftime and turned it over on downs or something, maybe. I don't know. I don't remember. It all runs together at this point. Or they missed a field goal. Maybe that was it. I don't know. Yeah, I guess he missed a field goal, interception, and they kicked 2 field goals. So yeah, it got to punch those in the end zone. Got to get 6. Can't take 3. Got to get 6, 7 when you get it down there. And that was their undoing last year, because instead of being up 24-0 or 28-0, they were only up 16-0, and they left the door wide open. There were some bad calls, some bad breaks, and Clemson took full advantage of it. And that's the game of football. That's life in the big city. So maybe some good breaks are due for Ohio State this time around. But I'm a firm believer you make your own breaks, and you do that with physicality. I mean, that's how Ohio State beat Miami way back in 2002 in the national championship game. That's how they beat Alabama. They punched the bully right in the mouth and out-bullied the bully with Alabama that everybody thought was a walkover going to beat Ohio State. So, and I think a lot of people think the same thing here, that Clemson's going to, come in and with Lawrence just going to, drop 40 points on them and beat them up. And I just don't see that. I think Ohio State's physicality on both sides of the ball, both lines of scrimmage, is a tremendous edge, I think, for Ohio State.
Before we get to the predictions, this is way off the beaten path, but it's been asked of me so many times this week. Is Urban Meyer going to coach in the NFL? I don't see it, but I don't know, man.
Let's do a 1, 2, 3 thumbs up or thumbs down between the three of us, and we'll see. All right, 1, 2, 3. Tony says yes.
Okay.
Kevin and I say no. Well, we're on record.
Do we have a particular location?
He takes one loss so hard, and I understand that the NFL is a different type of league where, you could sit there and drop 5 games and still go on and win the Super Bowl. But it's not like he's going to walk in and take over a team that's a 13-3 type of team or something like that. There're going to be a lot of losses in there. It would eat at his soul, and he would hate it. I can't imagine. And I just think that he's somebody who's much more into it for the teacher of young men or whatever, and not the coddling of mid-20, late 20-year-old some 20-something millionaires. I just don't think that it's his it's in his sweet spot.
So you don't think he can maintain that 91% winning percentage?
I agree. It seems strange, and I never thought he would be, because that's not his. First of all, it's not really his offense. And but now there's so much smoke, and I understand how much he hates losing, but in the NFL, a loss isn't losing. Losing is losing. Like 7 losses is losing. You have to be able to. 7 losses can get you in the playoffs. Losing is missing out on the playoffs, and I think being away from the game, I think he can understand that aspect of it, that everybody loses. And in college, the reason you can't lose is because if you lose once, then you cannot lose again. And so it's much more important. And so the NFL, you can lose. And if he goes to Jacksonville, he'll have Trevor Lawrence. So that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, my feeling is the health aspect plus the daughters and the grandkids and the son who's at UC. I think that it's a lot for him to leave Central Ohio and go somewhere else. Now, does he take Corey Dennis with him, and that would bring one of the daughters and their kids with them? And I'm not sure where his other daughter is living, if she's down south or if she's in Ohio or what. But you got some different considerations to think about there, the health and the family. And I think if you're a competitor, which we know he is, you want to compete at the highest level. And the National Football League, he's still relatively young enough that he could attack that and do a really good job with it. And it's just, is his health going to be okay for him to be able to do it? And you guys have it right, that if he's going somewhere where a job's open, he's going to want to compete. And I think that's the way it should be. And I think if you're a competitor, you want to compete at the highest level. And I think if you're a competitor, you want to compete at the highest level. And you guys have it right, that if he's going somewhere where a job's open, That team's not very good. Mike Vrabel really, I wouldn't say lucked into a good spot, but he found a great spot to get to the Final Four in his first year or second year, I guess. I don't know, whatever it was for him, but he's one of the few that take over a team and have that kind of unbridled success right out of the box. And if Meyer doesn't have that, is that going to eat him alive? And then his ulcers and his whatever are going to come back. And, the other thing is, I think in season, the quality of life for those people is not very good because, they are playing a game every 6.5 days. And it is like a 100-hour preparation to get ready for that next game. It's a ridiculous amount of work that you have to put in because the scouting and everything, my X is just as good as your O, basically, and you have to out-scheme us. And there's a lot of work that goes in to the game planning for those NFL teams. That's why the margin for error is so small in that league. It's how you see teams that you don't think are going to compete. New York Jets come in and beat teams that you figure are going to have a playoff run, Cleveland Browns, and it just kind of works out that way sometimes.
All right, prediction time. Here we go. Kevin, let's start with you.
I didn't want to go first. I'm sitting at dinner
You got to tell me in the chat before we get to it.
I know. I was sending angry messages to Tony on another platform. I sat at dinner with Tony and a couple other writers, and we were kind of talking about our picks. And I hadn't made my pick as of last night. And normally I write it days in advance, but truthfully speaking, Ohio State wins most of its games. So there's not a lot of discussion there, just a matter of hitting the score right. I've been walking around with 38-35 for about a week. I just didn't know who was going to have 38 and who was going to have 35. So this morning I woke up, and after all this time of trying to talk myself into picking the Buckeyes, I'm in, baby. Buckeyes winning 38-35. I got it. And I don't know why. I sound excited about this pick. I have no confidence in it, but 38-35, Ohio State.
Tony, Steve, sorry, we don't need to hear from you. We got the plan.
Okay.
It's in the books.
I'll go. I was like Kevin. I was torn. Monday night I did my chat, and people asked me, well, who are you going to pick and whatever. And I say, well, I know my score. It's 31-28. And it could be a field goal at the end. It could be overtime. It could be, any number of different scenarios, I guess. But I just think, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I think to go off what we saw last year and assume that Clemson's a better team than Ohio State. Ohio State outplayed Clemson last year. They had over 500 yards total offense in the game against Clemson last year, just failed to put the ball in the end zone in the red zone. That's the gist of it. And then left themselves bare to 3 really bad calls getting them. And, I don't feel the replay official was corrupt. I just think they were inept because they did overturn an incompletion early in the game. Garrett Wilson made some kind of circus highlight catch that they called incomplete on the field. And it was the replay official who buzzed down and said, no, we got to look at this, and overturned it for Ohio State. So the replay official was not, and that put them on the doorstep, at the 6-yard line. Of course, as we know, J.K. Dobbins dropped a screen pass, turning to run upfield before he had it. He would have still be running, right now because he had Myers out in front of him leading the way. He was going to score, and all they got there was a field goal. So that's an example endemic of what happened last year. But Ohio State outplayed them 6 ways to Tuesday. And so, I think in their mind, it's kind of like we have unfinished business, and obviously. But 31-28 is my pick. I think Fields, this is a contract game for him. He's going to show he can do it. ESPN put up a great graphic last night. I think all of his interceptions have come against ranked opponents. He has just feasted on unranked opponents. He has just feasted on them. But when he's in a game against an opponent that's ranked, I think he's now thrown, what would it be, a total of 8 interceptions as an Ohio State player, 3 last year and 5 this year, and all 3 of them were against the better teams that they played. So he really needs to step up and show he can play quarterback throwing the football against a quality opponent. Last year's game was okay, 320 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, though, and he wasn't able to run the ball last year either. So hopefully him running the ball can be a little bit of a difference this time around as well. I think it's Ohio State going on to Miami.
Okay. All right. I am going 31-27, and with that score, I realize after the fact that I'm well under the under of I believe the over under is like 66.5. So I've got the under when the 2 issues here are both defenses. So I'm not sure that that's the best pick, but I am taking Clemson to come away with the 31-27 win. It should be noted that I apparently picked Clemson last year as well. I don't know if I did it here. I probably hedged my bets and just I picked each team differently. That way I know I'm right somewhere. But I am going 31-27. Although if I had known the Tony Elliott situation, maybe I go 28-27 Clemson.
Okay. I get off the hook here. My pick will be on Patreon. So join me there. Just go to Patreon, search MarkRogersTV. We got our bowl picks today out there. So just find us there and take in everybody's live chat predictions. They're all over the place. Should be a good one. I believe it will be. Closer than 7.5 would indicate. Not that a great game can't turn out to be a 7-point spread, but 7.5 certainly indicates that Vegas believes Clemson is decidedly better. We shall see on Friday night. All right. For Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, Tony Gerdeman right below me from Buckeyes Scoop, Kevin Noon, of course, from Buckeye Grove on Rivals. Guys, it's always appreciated, and I will say it again. I hope everybody else out there appreciates the insight, the knowledge, the background, everything that we get here each and every week with these 3. You guys enjoy the game, and we will hopefully see you all next week.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care.